last panel, we have two wonderful and also strict chairs. My brother and colleague Ambeng Kandakasi, the Deputy Chief Justice of Papua New Guinea, and my sister and dear colleague Justice Michelle Weeks from the High Court of Barbados. The speakers are all of them experts on judicial education. Oh my God. And some of the finest in the world. So Justice Elisa Samuel from Mozambique, she's the director of the Judicial Academy. Justice Nambitha Dambuza, she is from South Africa, from the Supreme Court of Appeal, and president of the African Judicial Education Network on Environmental Law. We have Dimitri the Boer from the Netherlands, but he lives in China and coordinates judicial education programs for Chinese judges that were with us until yesterday. We have Christina Pak, the principal counsel for the Asian Development Bank, and someone that he has been with us and we with her in many, many occasions and in different activities. We have Justice Mansoor Ali Shah from the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and someone that can speak for over 4 minutes. and finally, Justice Damaris Vargas Vasquez from the Supreme Court of Costa Rica, all listed in alphabetical order by last name. With that, I'll leave the table and ask the two co-chairs to continue.
Thank you, Justice Benjamin, for setting the scene for this session. I'd like to pick up from General Clerk of the ADB, Tom Clark, giving the situation, the current circumstances in which the world is in as a war. We are at war. And in order to win a war, we need good soldiers who are well-trained, well-equipped, to then go in the front line, to at least fight on our behalf. That's where judicial education, not just any education, but judicial education on the rule of law becomes necessary, critical, and important. The principles that Justice Benjamin referred to, just what does it involve for the judges? What must they do? What tools must they have? What skills and knowledge must they have? That's where judicial education on the rule of law in the environment is critical. So we are gathered here today with men and women, judges who have done absolutely well in their own areas of leading, training fellow soldiers. So without further ado, I'll leave it to my co-chair to introduce and get to our speakers.
Thank you. Colleagues and participants, it's a pleasure for me to co-chair this panel with Justice Kandakasi, and I wish to thank the World Law Congress organizers in respect of the facilitation of this event. And I also wish to thank Justice Benjamin for doing a large part of my work by introducing the panelists. This combination of justices, together with professionals from international and national level organizations, they engage the judiciary by providing judicial education in environmental law in every part of the world. I'm from Barbados. My first exposure to the concept of the environmental rule of law was at the inaugural Inter-American Congress on the Environmental Rule of Law held in Jamaica in 2015. And since then, I have become a member of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment, and I have become convinced about the importance of judicial education in relation to this concept. As with the last panel, this is an opportunity for discussion and dialogue. We will begin with a key question for our speakers, and I ask that they limit their initial response, as before, to 3 to 4 minutes. Hopefully, we will have time for a second round of remarks from each speaker. The first question that I will pose is, what are your views on judicial education with regard to the environmental rule of law? And to start the ball rolling, I call on Justice Elisa Samuel to make her remarks.
Thank
You
you.
have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Good morning. Ishan, don't count now because I'm still saying good morning. I would like also to congratulate all the Jurist Association for this important meeting, and also our friend Justice Antonio Benjamin is not here, our chair for Global Judicial Institute on Environmental Law. I am from Mozambique. Normally I speak in Portuguese, but I'm afraid our translators will not be able to translate into English. I am the director of the Judicial Training Institute in Mozambique. So to answer the first question, I would like to change the word challenge into opportunities. What I'm saying that 2 decades in Johannesburg, when we were participating in the first symposium with the judges all over the world, the situation was critical. The countries, the judges, they are not, they're not aware about environmental law, about the environmental rule of law. The schools, the judicial training schools, they are not equipped with the proper programs. Today, we have all. One say that the national contest, of course, there is no single best method on educating judges. But once somebody says that the national contest is critical to the success of any education effort, this includes but is not limited to the type of legal system, judicial system, existing educational program for judiciary, ethical norms for judges, accepted educational methods in the country, and the cultural context. Talking about Mozambique, I would say we do have all of this. The school integrated environmental law on initial training. We are blessed because we train judges and prosecutors at the same course. We did improve with all the instruments that we get from UNEP, with this Greening the Judicial program, Greening the Judiciaries in Africa program, which is to design, revise the curriculum on environmental law. But the challenge, the big challenge, again, the big opportunity is that today we're talking about environmental law. Tomorrow we're talking about problems with biodiversity. And then deforestation. When I think my program, it's fine to conduct the trainings for judges, whether it's initial training or continuous training. Then comes climate change. Madam Director, you don't have climate change. You have to integrate climate change in your program, within your program. When I think I have this, then I have problems with pollution and so on and so forth. So now my question is how we incorporate in a way that we can target judges' needs, but not only judges, but prosecutors, lawyers, and somebody was talking about the local community. I would say by being innovative. I always participate in these forums, thanks to Justice Benjamin, my friend, ministro, meu amigo, and I always come back to Mozambique with new ideas, and I gather all the trainers within my school. I say, guys, we are not doing any more like this. They say, Director, you have to decide what you want. No, because we have, okay, I have 1 minute. Because we really, to overcome these problems that were pointed here, that cases are not coming to the court. So we find the solution. We went to the community. Judges, when they are on initial training, they are the ones who goes to the community, speaks with the communities, they prepare topics about environmental law, biodiversity, and they go to the community for themselves to speak. Of course, it's part of training. That's where it comes the innovation. They have to go and clean up the beaches. They have to, it's part of the training, so that we can shape a better profile of these future judges or future prosecutor. Because the problem, and I end up with this, it's not the legal environment, it's not, I mean, it's not the judicial systems. Well, the compliance we're saying earlier, I totally agree, but we have to think on shape or reshape the men, the profile of the judge, maybe the profile of the members of the government who sometimes time's up. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice, for your remarks. Justice Nambitha Dambuza, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Shah. My views on the environmental rule of law and how education fits into the whole topic is that I think firstly what we have to center ourselves on is that law generally regulates the conduct of people, of entities. That is what is central to what we're doing. And the distinction between a rule of law, I think, generally, and environmental rule of law is that in other areas of law are rooted in common law principles, in their interpretation of the law. Environmental law consists essentially of statutes and conventions and treaties. So essentially, we are interpreting legal documents. And I think the principle of interpreting legal documents and law in that is expressed in that fashion, we all know, takes into account the text of the law, the context in which the law is applied, and the purpose for which the law is designed. The two are expressed normally in the convention or whatever statutory legal instrument you are interpreting. The purpose will be stated there, and the text is what it is. It is the text. What we don't have as judges in environmental law is the context in which we are interpreting these laws. And that what is our challenge is the foundational knowledge that we need in order to be relevant in our application of the laws. And this is where judicial education comes in. How do we fashion, how do we acquire this knowledge? Who do we look to for this, for acquiring this knowledge? The biggest challenge is that we are dealing with a legal profession that is rooted in the culture of judges as repository of knowledge. That it is assumed that judges know everything. And that generates sense in judges of not requiring further education and or just being reluctant to get out of their comfort zones and seek this knowledge and expose themselves to professionals from other disciplines and be talked to and be taught, essentially, because as lawyers, we acquire all the knowledge that we need at university, and then we get trained in legal precedent, so that together with university knowledge is supposed to suffice. So it seems to me we do need a bit of change management as well in approaching judicial education, because we're dealing with people that are sort of so set in their ways that we cannot rely on just our peer-to-peer convincing. We need professional change management. Should we also be looking to our retired judges as well to assist us? I saw a video some time ago in which a Chief Justice of Jamaica says they go out in on certain days to communities to just go and explain what a constitution is. That is in a context of non-confrontation. They go out to the communities. Should we be looking at that? Should we be looking also at training the trainer so that we have colleagues that are actually trained in training others? Or should we also be looking at intensifying our approach to judiciary leadership? Because those are the people that will sort of set the stage to make the rest of the judiciaries amenable or open opportunities for the rest to avail themselves for judicial education. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Justice. I now turn to Mr. Dimitri de Boer to give his remarks on the topic at hand.
Well, thank you. I never thought that I would be talking to a room full of justices about environmental judges' education, but here I am. About 8 years ago, the Supreme People's Court of China asked ClientEarth to start training the Chinese judges on environmental rule of law. And now, 8 years later, a lot of progress has been made. I don't think we can take much credit for that. I'd say there's been a very strong leadership in the Chinese Supreme Court to do that. But that comes back to Nambitha's point just now of the need for leadership of chief justices and justices as role models for all judges in their jurisdiction, to take a very active interest in environmental education and environmental science. So that's a good point. I think the one point that I'd like to make from this long experience is that when you're doing environmental judges trainings, languages are different, laws are different, everything's different. But what is really, really similar is the environmental problems. And so the stories, the cases that come in front of judges do translate really, really well. So rather than trying to get too deep into the weeds of different laws, once you start talking about cases, everybody understands each other, and then you have a very meaningful exchange. So that would be the number one piece of advice. Another thing that I would like to emphasize is that having a focus on global environmental problems like climate change and biodiversity loss, it makes sense. When you're doing environmental judges trainings, it does make sense to focus on those things because local environmental problems are probably more, they're more familiar to the local judges and therefore may require less training. But when you're talking about global environmental issues, the science around them is evolving quickly, global conventions are evolving quickly, and let's say the role of the judge is even more important because it requires somebody who can really step back from all the local interests that are immediately at hand and think about what are the global implications of the cases in front of them. And then it can also be helpful to look at what is the most advanced jurisprudence on such cases. So we know Brian Preston, for example, made a very interesting ruling on climate change. So did Justice Mansoor sitting next to me, and Justice Antonio Benjamin made so many advanced principles. And so for judges to be familiar with those emerging principles and emerging ways to write rulings is extremely valuable. So I will conclude by saying that there is not enough environmental judges education happening in the world by a long way. So let's all do our part to try to do more. Certainly, from our side, we'd be very, very happy to step up our game and to work with all of you, with the Global Judicial Institute for the Environment, with the World Commission on Environmental Law, with ADB, with UNEP, and others. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dimitri. I now turn to Christina. Christina Papp, Principal Counsel at the Asian Development Bank. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. I actually have my own timers. I'll start it now. It's such a privilege to be among the global judiciary, our longstanding development partners and colleagues. What I like to contribute to this dialogue is ADB's experience over the years delivering judicial education, and I think that evolution will reflect the changing needs. As well as, ADB also covers the Asia-Pacific region, so there's a diversity in delivering judicial education, taking more of a tailored approach. But, our General Counsel, Thomas Clark, introduced ADB's judicial education program. We were one of the early investors, starting in 2010. At that time, there was a need because by nature, environmental disputes are multidisciplinary, it's complex. I think you've heard the reasons why judicial education in environmental law is critical, is required. And that goes back to, judges, when they sit there and they have these cases, it's most judges didn't take environmental law as an undergrad. So that sort of like goes back to the fundamental problem. And that's one of the, I guess, entree points that we've also spotted right away. So we have a complementary program called Environmental Law Champions, TA, program, where we're like, well, who's going to train the judges? And one of the hallmarks of, I think, environmental judicial education is that there is a lack of experts and trainers just because it's still so specialized. So there is this need to bring up a new generation to develop that national capacity, because when we go in country to do training, it is really tough to identify national experts. Therefore, I think, in the meantime, while the national expertise is being developed, organizations like the ADB, UNEP, ClientEarth, and other international partners can help, bridge that gap while the expertise to deliver judicial education is going on. But I have to say the nature of the disputes have changed in the last decade. I mean, they've only gotten more complex. We've heard it all. It's driven by new laws, new principles, just really people going to the courts to push the envelope. So judges are just like faced with so many tough issues. So I would say the urgency for judicial education is greater now, and urgency because where the clock's ticking. So on just the fundamentals of judicial education, the state of Asia-Pacific judiciaries is that they are insufficiently resourced. This is a huge problem, and overall, there is lack of investment in the justice sector, but more so in the judicial education. So this makes it especially challenging because most of the when we go in, a lot of the judicial education is just being delivered on an ad hoc basis. There is no, institutionalization of judicial education in many of our countries. Of course, countries that have more resources, they do have the judicial academies, they have the infrastructure. But in the least developed countries, countries with less resources, this is a huge problem on the ad hoc nature of judicial education. I'm running up. I've already exceeded my time and didn't look at, but the last point is really the need for networks, and that is a huge source of judicial education. So platforms like this it is critical, and that is why we bring our Asia Pacific judiciaries to global forums, regional platforms, and connect them with different partners. So I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you, Christina, for outlining ADB's experience and role in the education of judges. It's not on? Right. Sorry. Thank you, Christina, for outlining ADB's experience and role in the education of judges in the Asian area. I now turn to Justice Syed Mansoor Ali Shah from Pakistan. You have the floor.
Thank you. I'll try to do justice with the 10 minutes I have. Let me just bring in a totally new dimension, you see. We are talking about judicial education in the context of producing judges who are going to enforce environmental law. So what I find essential in this equation is that they need to be connected with nature. Unless they feel nature, unless, as it were, be in nature, there's no way we can produce judges who would effectively enforce environmental law. So how do we do that? One approach is certainly science-based and statistics and all that. And we've realized in our judicial academies that that doesn't really connect. That doesn't really speak to the judge. So what do we do? And one has to see the judge, the context in which he operates. That would be traditions, that would be culture, and I want to underline the religion. 80% of the world population is connected to or subscribes to one form or the other of established religion. And I've woken up to this myself. You know, Islamic environmentalism brings in the keys. You see, the richness that religion brings and the way it connects us to nature is unbelievable. For example, the fundamentals that come out of Islamic environmentalism would be that there's one creator, you see, so oneness of the entire planet. There's one creator creating all the life in this world, the living beings, so that's the connectedness. Then it says that we are stewards here, you see, we are the trustees, we need to look after this planet. Is a very strong substantive connection. Then it says there has to be a balance that has to be brought about. So this, I mean, an ordinary person connects with faith rather deeply than rather with science and statistics. So principles like walk gently on the earth, for example, principles of having harmony on the planet. There's a tradition in Islam which says have a life like a honeybee. Honeybee is, you know, anything that it eats, I'm talking about a honeybee, anything it eats is clean, anything it drops is clean, anywhere it sits does not break a branch, you see. So this is a very strong tradition coming out of Islam which says, let the life be like a honeybee. So it is it's time that we merge, we bring in this richness that comes out of religion, these values that come out of religion, and merge them along with science and whatever scientific information we have to bring in that culture. I believe an environmental judge might disregard environmental law, but will never disregard the richness of the principles that he believes in through faith. So I think this entire world, this richness that religion brings to the table needs to be incorporated in our judicial education, and that would actually transform and probably connect the judge to nature, which I think is essential for any, and when we talk about passion and we talk about interest in environment, that can only come if we really connect with nature. And one way of doing that would be to go back to our culture, our religion, and those values which predate science and try to incorporate them in the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Shah. attention to the question at hand. It's not yeah. Thanks, Justice Ali Shah, and thanks for adding a spiritual dimension to the question at hand. I now pass the baton to Justice Damaris Vasquez from the Supreme Court of Costa Rica. Justice Vargas, you have the floor.
Muy buenos días para todos y todas. En realidad, el enfoque que se está planteando es que la capacitación en materia ambiental tiene que estar acorde con la justicia centrada en las personas en los términos de la OCDE. Es decir, nuestro enfoque tiene que ser hacia la ciudadanía. Por eso tenemos que hacer comprender a la ciudadanía cuáles son sus derechos, cuáles son los servicios que nosotros ofrecemos. Esta es la única manera de poder empoderarnos y tener más casos para conocer en materia ambiental. Si la ciudadanía no tiene conocimiento de esta información, difícilmente va a acudir a los tribunales y no vamos a tener casos suficientes. Y la relación que tengamos en la judicatura con la ciudadanía tiene que ser muy estrecha, muy directa. Por eso tomo las palabras que se señalaba ahora del anterior expositor de que tenemos que ser jueces y juezas conectados con la naturaleza. Yo le llamo jueces de campo, no jueces de escritorio. Nuestro perfil no puede ser como los jueces tradicionales que resolvemos desde nuestras oficinas, sino que tenemos que trasladarnos al sitio, ver qué es lo que está pasando, enamorarnos de la naturaleza también para poder conocerla. Hay algo fundamental y me gustó mucho la presentación que hizo la jueza canadiense sobre el tema indígena. Nosotros estamos trabajando de manera fuerte lo que es el pluralismo jurídico, formarnos en eso. Es una corriente de los años 70 y la venimos conociendo y reconociendo recientemente por el derecho de los pueblos indígenas. Nosotros necesitamos en materia ambiental acercarnos a los pueblos indígenas porque son los guardianes del bosque. Ellos tienen una cultura distinta de protección que nosotros muchas veces no comprendemos porque no nos involucramos directamente. En mi país estamos trabajando en la construcción de la política indígena del Poder Judicial y lo hacemos interrelacionando con los 8 pueblos que se ubican en los 24 territorios indígenas. No es igual que dar un discurso en esas actividades, sino que hay que ir directamente a los territorios en sus propios idiomas, concertar posiciones con ellos. Nosotros no estamos acostumbrados a la concertación, tomamos decisiones y se ejecutan, pero aquí tiene que haber un diálogo abierto, una escucha activa, tiene que haber confianza intercultural con estos pueblos para nosotros poder captar toda la información que ellos tienen que darnos a nosotros para una administración de justicia eficiente en materia ambiental y aprender muchísimo de ellos, que ellos sean nuestros capacitadores. Es un cambio en el enfoque cultural que tenemos. De igual manera, me parece que el perfil de la judicatura debe ser de personas expertas, no solamente en la normativa interna ambiental, sino muy especialmente en la normativa internacional que está por encima de la misma constitución política porque es de derechos humanos. En el caso nuestro así lo ha enfocado la Sala Constitucional de manera vinculante, pero no es fácil tener ese enfoque. Cuando vamos a resolver un caso, primero pensar en los convenios internacionales y luego en la normativa interna, y si esa se ajusta a esa normativa internacional, porque estamos administrando recursos que son globales, no son de nuestra localidad, de nuestro país, de nuestra región, sino que son de planeta, todo interfiere. Me parece igualmente que el tema de la capacitación necesitamos trabajar con altos estándares internacionales para garantizar la vida y la seguridad de las personas defensoras de derechos humanos. Nosotros como jueces y juezas somos defensores de derechos humanos. El tema de nuestra independencia judicial muchas veces no lo comprendemos, no lo llevamos al límite y tenemos que garantizarlo también. Igualmente hay algo fundamental y es que no podemos cruzarnos de brazos diciendo estas leyes están obsoletas, no responden a la realidad actual. No, nosotros no emitimos leyes, nosotros aplicamos las leyes que tenemos. Entonces tenemos que utilizar una interpretación evolutiva. Esas normas que tenemos de hace mucho tiempo, interpretarlas y traerlas a la realidad actual. para dar solución a los problemas ambientales que estamos enfrentando en estos momentos. Si los poderes legislativos no nos apoyan con leyes modernas, no importa, a través de interpretación evolutiva y de convenios internacionales, vamos avanzando en ese proceso. Igualmente creo que debemos enamorar a la judicatura con lo ambiental. ¿Cómo podemos hacerlo? Tenemos que hacer cambios, utilizar inteligencia artificial, utilizar mecanismos virtuales, dinámicos, de forma tal que hagamos un cambio radical, que enamoremos en la materia ambiental, porque muchas veces los jueces y las jueces, por no tener jurisdicción especializada, se van a otras áreas. Muchas gracias.
Yeah, your time. Thank you. We're finished. Wow, that was a ton of information. Knowledge, experience, angles to judicial education, content. What should it be? Spiritual, the connecting with the people on the ground, with the local wisdom, knowledge and experience on climate, weather patterns, the biodiversity that exists. How do we package an appropriate course content for judicial education on the environment, rule of law? All of these great speakers, speaking from their experience, highlight the challenges we have. The education program for the climate law, rule of law, is different, certainly different. It is not taught at law school. It's not taught when someone wants to become a lawyer, and judges suddenly thrown in. They are the frontliners in this war that we are now facing. And in order for them to help us, at least at the best level possible, is to properly equip them. So ADB has given us a great angle to one of the needs that judicial institutions face worldwide: funding, technical support. And that it's important to note that that help is now available. There's a program there. And the way I'm getting now is we're doing different things, but this is a common course. It is global. It's the planet. So if we can bring together all of the skills, all of the content development that needs to go in, I'm hearing that might be a single, if you like, maybe like the supermarket analogy we were using in the last 2 days. If we could have a template or a draft content to deliver at the Judicial Education Institutes, that might help, rather than each one of us doing our own thing. I might have left out some of the important points made. My co-chair will pick up on that. But I think what matters now is the context, the content, and where do you go for the source of that wisdom and knowledge you want to impart to the judges. I think the judges will say, no, I've known enough, I think is a fool. I don't mind saying that, because education never stops until the day we kick the bucket. So we need to be, the challenges of how do we get those kind of judges into this awareness, to be also playing the same role as you and I are playing. And I think the key might lie in an appropriate content for judicial education on the environment, rule of law. Over to you, my co-chair.
Thank you, Justice Kandakasi. I completely endorse Justice Kandakasi's remarks. Certainly, from all of the presentations, I've detected that there needs to be a complete cultural shift in terms of how we deal with judicial education, how we move forward, and certainly. I think the discussion has highlighted the need for judiciaries worldwide to approach the whole issue of judicial education in an interdisciplinary way. Certainly, Justice Shah, he emphasized the spiritual dimension that perhaps we could adopt and to ensure that there is effective implementation of environmental rights and duties worldwide. And certainly coming out of what Justice Kandakasi said, I think a question, because I think there's enough time for a second round, the question that might be put to the panelists is, where do we go from here? Are there any other suggestions, recommendations about how we move forward?
Can I sort of put in? Yeah, just quickly, you see, one intervention is that considering that we considered to be the role models who are going to be, driving the environmental movement in a way, it's high time that we change our lifestyles. You see, we need to incorporate the change in ourselves also, and in the way we work, in the way we act. It'll be very important. I mean, judges could then also become living role models who are living up to the standards. That's important. Perhaps not traveling so far and with a huge carbon footprint to attend a conference could also be something that I wish to raise, because it could be all video linked now. Because if that's where we're heading, then what are we really doing that in our own lives, or are we not? Are we just simply saying that in our judgments, or should we also in our institution itself? Is our institution based on, what kind of energy we're using in our institution? So let's just start at home. Let's see how we're going to rephase or refashion our own judiciary, see the way we work, the way we function and all that. And the second intervention would be that I think we need to introduce at the education, at the judicial education or at the academy, a clinical component. Judges need to really go out and see what nature is all about. They need to also interact with the people, the communities, which has been said earlier. But there is no such program, at least in our country, where we take the judges out, so they actually get to see what is happening and what are the trends. Yeah. So that's about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Elisa.
No, just want to add something that I forgot to share, that I think is helpful for judicial institutes, because as our chair has said, environmental law is not being taught in universities nowadays as well. Yeah, it is improved, not in all faculties of law. But what we did in Mozambique, we organized, let's say, a workshop. We call all the faculties of law, public and private, and to sort of find a solution together. What is their role and what is our role as a judicial training institute? Because it's a very short time of initial training, at least initial training. In my country, it's 1 year. It's not enough to tackle all the perspectives in terms of environmental law and all the variants that comes with it. So I think what we did is with universities, with researchers, we said, okay, you have this role, you have to introduce in terms of principles, in terms of, how do you say, fontes de direito? Sources, thank you, in terms of sources. And when they come to us, we will pick from here. At least they come with knowledge, a little bit of knowledge, because this was one of the challenges that we had. And I think it's working very well. And also increase more, as Justice Mansoor has said, it's important to make judges aware of the economic loss that countries like ours are having with let's say, Chinese taking our resources, our timber and everything. They participate. We are having this joint workshop with Syed, South Africa Judicial Training Institute. It's gonna happen in Kruger Park, in Skukuza, to talk about wildlife. They will deal. There is a court in Skukuza, in Kruger Park. There is an environmental court there. So this is, they don't go with suits. They go with boots. They wear the proper clothes to interact with animals, to interact with the police who do the fiscalization and everything. And I think it works. So if you ask me where we go from here, I think this is the way we have to follow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can only add that perhaps part of what makes or what stunts our judicial education is that those of us who take interest and become aware of the deficiencies then do not have time to put that into writing. And you see this coming through in the judgments of your colleagues, that if a matter is presented, for example, as a purely administrative law case, that's how it will be dealt with. But frankly speaking, there is no aspect of our lives that does not entail environmental law. If a dispute is presented as a purely zoning and challenging a decision of whether it falls within a certain zone, we do not now have opportunity to write and set out where the deficiencies are in the judgments that are coming from our colleagues, or those that we review ourselves. So if we could have a way of supporting some kind of review of judgments that could have been decided in a manner that takes into account the fact that environmental law is essentially part of all decision-making that we have, whether it's a commercial license, whether it is a fuel station license that is about to be approved or not. The problem with not knowing is that you don't know what you don't know. So colleagues who think that there is no need to be educated, some of them are saying so genuinely because they do not see anything that is peculiar in a particular case that comes before them. And therefore we need to sort of tease out these aspects of cases that are seemingly run-of-the-mill to show what is peculiarly environmental law about them, but we don't have the time.
Right. Before Christina next, and then Mansoor, but I wish to completely endorse what Madam Justice has just said. Coming from a small island developing state, sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that we don't really have that many environmental law cases. And that is not the case, because, I mean, sometimes normal tort cases involving fumes or whatever, those cases can amount to quote-unquote environmental law cases. So I think also the challenge is, in different areas of the world, different regions of the world, there's a need to address maybe different aspects of training, because obviously in a region that is very heavily forested, that is obviously like the Amazon and other regions. It's obvious that there is an environmental issue there, but the same applies for small island developing states and other smaller countries which may not have the apparent vast array of environmental, forests or whatever. So I just wanted to add that I think there's room for perhaps, but I know this is primarily the Asian aspect, but there's room for expanding judicial education, as Madam Justice said, to sensitize the judiciary to the fact that there are aspects of what we think are normal run-of-the-mill cases that have environmental law embedded in them.
Thank you. I'm going to just leave everyone with, there's got to be evolution and innovation. Delivering judicial education is a evolving process, and we could evolve to address the need to scale, given the limited resources. But there's new ways of delivering judicial education that we're looking into. It's no longer about just studying judgments. We're also providing new ways of thinking, new judicial skills through case management, decision writing, and also new ways of, I think the evolution and innovation has also seeped into the procedural rules, which can also address some of the access to justice issues. So, I mean, over the years, there were no specialized rules for environmental cases, but there has been over the years, and this trend is continuing, as well as specialized courts for environmental cases, and this may also address the resource constraints. And then finally, the judicial education is something that must continue, so we have to keep evolving, and actually, and one of the ways I think the point that I liked was the interdisciplinary nature, because this is my last point is, I love what Justice Singh said about bringing in the, training non-lawyers, that judges can do that, and oftentimes we don't mix in other, participants, like for example, prosecutors, and judges complain, say to us, well, we're not getting cases. That has to do with judicial education, because judicial education would open the doors to provide access to justice, which would bring more cases. So I really like that element. So really, I think we all need to work together to continuously evolve judicial education and different ways of delivery. Thanks.
I think the academy needs to consider environment as a totally different subject, unlike any other subject. That's very important. I think that's not how in South Asia the judicial academies are looking at environment. You see, they look at environment like any other subject. I think it's a unique subject which requires we need to retool the curriculum totally. The multidisciplinary aspect to this program is not really factored in, at least from whatever I've seen in the South Asian academies. So that diversity has to be brought in, and what I've said earlier, all those things need to be brought in, and environment has to be taken up as a separate area, unlike any other subject. Only then could we probably move forward, and I think that's the road ahead. We cannot treat it like any other subject. It has to we need to bring in all that richness that we talked about, maybe through religion, maybe through science and all the other things that we talked about, so that the space that environment needs to have in an academy is very different from what it's been given today. See, that's what I wanted to underline.
Dimitri.
Thank you. So, I guess scaling up is the big word here, and I think there's several things that can be done, but some things need to be done by country. So, for example, specialized environmental courts and judges, in many countries we've seen that working quite well. So my sort of assessment is that that's good experience, but it's really difficult, I think, to change these systems in countries. But we are ambassadors for environmental rule of law, everybody in the room here. So this is one thing that I think we can all take to chief judges and lawmakers around the world to share with them as experience that appears to be working well. Another thing that may be easier to do is what Indonesia has been doing with certifying judges with environmental knowledge. So saying that these judges have participated in environmental trainings, adjudication trainings, and then get certified. And so in Indonesia, you have to be an experienced judge, and you have to have that certification before you're allowed to take these environmental cases, which that could be an innovation which might be slightly easier to achieve, but it still helps to somehow specialize the judges. And now later this year, we'll start the first round of what they call the advanced certification training. So they also want to have sort of a further level of advancement. So then coming to us, let's say, as networks of environmental judges, scaling up could perhaps mean, I like the fact that there's now a focus on knowledge products. So the Model Forest Act, I think, is a very good example. Some booklets were previously produced with best examples of climate cases and biodiversity cases. It might seem simple, but having this type of resource coming out of a group like yours is actually quite powerful. And I think you are seeing a lot of recognition from the world's Jurist Association and others with many medals of honors and other things. So it seems that there is recognition for the role that you're already playing as heroes in this space. So, but you can do more with that, I think, in terms of producing such knowledge products, perhaps further guidance documents or documents that have principles in them that you consider good practice could be shared with the world. And maybe, so there's only a few of us here, right? But I wonder, is there ways maybe to make sort of trained trainers or to have more judges coming into this group who will continue to be ambassadors around the world for spreading the gospel, the religion of environmental rule of law. So I'll leave it with that. But anyway, oh yeah, and working with universities, that's another thing, right? Those young students studying law, they should all learn about the environment and environmental law, right? So that's another thing we can, I think, try to share with our friends who are running law schools and law universities around the world to say, look, this is no longer, what do you call it? One of the courses, right? It's not optional. No, this should be part of the curriculum. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Burning thoughts? If not, then it's for us as co-chairs to bring this panel to a close, but that will happen with His Honor Justice Benjamin, who's already at the podium to do so. He will thank everybody, but let me say thank each and every one of you, the organizers of this great law conference, the side event organizers as well, if they are around. We register our appreciation. And also, may I thank ADB, UNEP, and everybody else that has made it possible for my colleagues and others to attend these last few days of work we've been undertaking. Over to you, Tony.
Well, thank you, Ambeng. This concludes our program for today. As it happens often, this is just a very shallow overview of all the important topics that we have before us as judges. But let's take the optimistic side of it. 20 years ago, we would not be discussing this. And now, look at our panel, highly specialized, discussing judicial education on environmental law with all different perspectives. I mean, they converge, but we have different perspectives in the panel, from the cosmology or spiritual part all the way to how we organize a curriculum and so on. I know that this is being recorded, and perhaps Patricia and Andy and Juliana, this is such a rich material that we should use in the transplant to the judicial portal. Let me use the opportunity to finally thank the organizers, our partners, the co-chairs, the speakers, the participants, and especially the interpreters. Perhaps nobody more than we from the legal profession understand the importance of language and words. Words in our profession convey power and justice, eventually. With that, the conversation will continue, and I ask you to join me in thanking the two co-chairs and this fantastic panel.